I think, start with some conversation around Washington, D.C., because I think that having you here this evening, we can sort of set a tone in terms of this conversation with the fact that the United States is going through some convulsions right now. And, it has implications for our communities each and every day. You may have heard that this week, New York State was targeted with the global travel uh, uh, ban, if you will, for New York State residents. That, well, it's not really, if you are already registered as a global traveler, you will be able to use that until it expires. And then you won't be able to renew it. But if you haven't applied and you were intending to apply, you will not be allowed that opportunity. And we're the only state in the United States that is faced with this bar. And it's a pressure tactic that is really beneath the level of which we should be operating as a nation. We can settle our differences without inflicting pain and harm on people. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, we're in that season with the current occupant of the White House. And it has real time implications for us. Because if you're a business person and you have to travel around the world for business, having that access is important. Time is money, right? And it adds value to our society that we have individuals from our communities that do that travel. It's a benefit to our nation that we have global travelers. It is a real tribute to our nation that we are a global society. Unfortunately, not everyone values that in this particular time. I think what's most important is that we value it. And that's why I travel to Guyana, because I value it. I value the people who are a part of the village that raised me. And I saw this as not just a mission, but a part of my duty to go and to see and to meet with as many people as I possibly could to get a sense of what it is that made the Guyanese people so very special. And so this meeting these meetings, series of meetings that we took while in Guyana really provided a lens into that. The first thing I want to say is that Guyana is a young country. Guyana is a young democracy. The United States is a young democracy, but Guyana is much younger. And I believe in the sovereignty of nations. And so my focus is, what do I see and what can I do that will be productive given the sovereignty of a nation, given its setting its own chart for its own destiny. And what I decided to do while in Guyana was to listen, to hear various perspectives, to get a sense of where folks are in terms of growth and development as civil society, as governance. And what I saw in Guyana is not much different than some of the things I see right here in the United States of America, quite frankly. But what I recognize is that at the point in time where the Guyanese people have decided that they want to move their nation through unity in a certain direction, they're going to do that. And until they get to that point, they're not. There are high stakes involved here, and there always has been, right? Very wealthy nation, extremely wealthy nation. And that wealth comes from natural resources, yes, but it also comes from its people and valuing that humanity. And so when you get to that point and you realize this is a big, big, big country with a little bit of people, with a little bit of people. Guyana has the same population as my congressional district. Right? You're in the diaspora, you might add another congressional district and a half. Right? If you were actually added as part of Homeland, right? And I think about how crucial you are as the diaspora to the development of that homeland. Because one congressional district can't manage all of that by themselves, especially if they're divided. Especially if they're divided. But the potential for the growth, the development, the leadership, the regional positioning, the hemispheric transition, the potential is, it's as much as you can envision. And so I'm not going to go much further. I just want to give you, set the tone of sort of how I approach this visit. And we have now been joined by the man of the hour, the Congressman. Drop in my earring here. Yeah, the back is somewhere over there. None other than the Honorable Congressman Gregory Meeks.
I want to know just what plane did you get, Yvette? I was stuck.
That was a 135 that left at 2:45.
I was on the 2 o'clock,
I know.
and I guess we were on the runway.
And how long did you sit?
We sat there for about an hour. Then they pulled us back to the gate. So then they put me on the 3 o'clock. And then at 3 o'clock wasn't going to take me off. They put me back on the 2 o'clock. Then the 2 o'clock said it wasn't going to go, that the 3 o'clock was going to go. So I was going back and forth on planes.
My gosh.
It's just crazy. You just made the last plane.
Been there, done that.
So,
We just got out. We were
good evening, everybody. It's good to see you and good to be with you, especially with see my council member here. I don't know, did you get a chance to give greetings yet?
Yes, she did.
Okay, good deal. And my beloved sister, Yvette Clarke, who is my partner in the United States Congress. We work very closely together on all things, but especially on the Caribbean and Guyana. You know, I sit on and serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I am the vice chair of the Western Hemisphere Subcommittee. And of course, Yvette is on the very powerful Energy and Commerce Committee. And it was decided by us talking collectively that, and talking to some of you too, that it would be very important for us to take a trip to Guyana to see for ourselves what was going on and to try to make sure that we were delivering a message that what we wanted to make sure that took place was a free and fair election and a process that was leveled across the board so that whenever the election was over, it is something that it is an election that could be certified by a number of individuals, certified first, of course, by the Election Commission there, but also get the sign of approval by a number of the oversight, people that will be observing the elections, to make sure that they're signing. In fact, we were told that back when the democracy was happening in Guyana, the Carter Center played a tremendous role in overseeing and making sure that the elections was free and fair. And we were assured that the Carter Center will be very much involved in the elections coming up this March. And we met with several different people. So It was the chair, I'm sure maybe the Congresswoman, you didn't go into the detail, the chair of the Western Hemisphere Subcommittee, who happens to come from New Jersey. His name is Albio Ceres. So he's the chair of the Western Hemisphere. So he was the quote unquote leader of the delegation, and we convinced him to put this together because that's how you do your protocol. And Yvette and I, who had this interest because we both represent the largest Guyanese populations in our respective districts. And so she may have also told you. So what we decided to do, we're doing, in effect, 2 town hall meetings. One here in Queens and one in Brooklyn, which we're going to do on Sunday, so that both of our constituencies get to hear and understand what took place and what we believe the information that we received, as well as get to answer some questions that you may have. And as I walked in, I heard my colleague talking about how important you are and those that are in the diaspora. You are tremendously important to this entire process and roles that you can play because it is a huge election. We understand that. And I see and have seen firsthand on my way to Guyana. The plane was actually, because now there is a direct flight from JFK to Guyana. Now, it was late at night, so we had some jet lag going on. But it's a direct flight. And the flight was packed. Every seat was taken. It was jam-packed. And sitting next to me was a gentleman who is a native of Guyana, now a citizen here in the United States, but was going back to Guyana to do business. In fact, what he was doing is building. He was building homes and communities, and he said that he felt somewhat lucky because he started to do this before there was any discovery in regards to oil. And now, as a result of the discovery, there are a number of individuals, and already certain incomes are starting to rise. And so he has negotiating and continued to negotiate to determine if there is additional property that he could purchase. And his thing was that he was waiting. He had already negotiated some land. I think it was about 50 acres. But he, too, was waiting for the end result or for this election to take place so that whichever side won the election, he could then continue to talk to them to work to see if he can even expand, to try to make sure there's affordable homes along with some of the, I thought of it as some of the same situations we have here at home, affordable homes along with luxury homes for those that could afford, bigger homes or things of that nature. So I just say all to say that there is a distinct interest in what is taking place in Guyana, and the individuals in this room, in this city, can play a tremendous role in it. And they're looking back and forth. So we met with just about everybody that we thought played a big role or would play a role. We met with the president. We met with the head of the opposition, the former president. We met with the civic groups because we wanted to hear from some grassroots individuals, some that were from a women's organization, some from a youth organization. We wanted to get a feel of what was taking place on the ground. We met with the Carter Center. We met with the Electoral Commission. We met with the Peace Corps. So we and whom else am I mentioning? The Chamber of the businesses there, the Chamber of Commerce. So we tried to do a broad spectrum of every piece of society so that we could get a feel of what was taking place. One of the other things I admit that we also did, because some of you know what's taking place in Washington, D.C., I wanted to get a check to see how the ambassador was, because we've got some ambassadors now that have been appointed by the president, and they have a whole different role that they play in my estimation. But we were pleased to find out that it was not a presidential appointee who's the ambassador. She is a career ambassador. And we felt comfortable that being a career and listening and being debriefed at the embassy, that she would be, even-handed and fair in trying to make sure that the United States government did the right thing and would not put its foot on the scale one way or the other. And that was clear in in the conversation that we had with her initially, in the briefing that we had, and with her personnel. So that was something that we felt good about, that we were not sure, but we wanted to check it out when we got there, because we don't want the United States to put their foot on the scale one way or the other. What we want to do is to make sure that there's a fair and clearly impartial election. And so it was a whirlwind trip. I mean, we were there for about, 24 to 48, not even 48 hours. That's right. It was nonstop, and it was from the time we landed all day. And with the election, we met with the Election Commission. And we learned some things. I mean, some things that I did not know. What was interesting and talked about with reference to the Election Commission is how the Election Commission, because that was an issue that I knew going in, but wanted to know and make sure I understood how the Election Commission was chosen. And I know there was an issue also that we asked both sides about in regards to after the vote of no confidence, what was taking place and why did it take longer to have the elections, because based upon the Constitution, it said that elections should be had within, 60 days? 60 days. No, 90 days, that's what it is, 90 days, 90 days, 90 days. And so what we found in talking is that, number one, the Electoral Commission is made up of 2 individuals from the opposition side, 3 from the government, and 3 from, we met with 2, and 1 that everybody agreed on, that the opposition and the administration agreed upon. So we found that, so that's how it was, which is similar to what we do here. And then we met with that person who seemed that she was going to stay focused and make sure that there was a fair and impartial election. I'm going to stop here. Anything you want to add right here, Yvette?
The other thing, we met with the oil executives, right? ExxonMobil is there. They're on the ground, and they're not in this by themselves. They are actually part of a consortium. And then included in that consortium is China, right? And so, these are high stakes elections. There's no doubt about this. But I wanted just to add where I sort of began. And that is, how does a nation determine its own destiny? And what role will you play in that? I think all of you, if you're an American citizen, you also have dual citizenship. Am I correct about that? And so, voting is important no matter what. And if you have the ability and you have a vision for what you see and want to help in terms of the development of that nation, part of that is how you exercise your franchise. Just putting it plain. Remember the size of the population. What we heard, what I've been told just since I've come back, the find of oil in Guyana puts you on par with Abu Dhabi. For a small nation, not a small nation, a large nation with a small population. And we keep hearing it. Oil can be it can be a blessing or it can be a curse. So now, what does that mean for the development of the politics of the nation? We were there to make sure that there are free, fair, and a commitment to nonviolent elections. We talked about free and fair, but we kept emphasizing you all tear each other apart. You're creating openings for others to come in and exploit your nation. Period. End of story. Full stop. No one wins. No one wins. And add to that the instability of Venezuela and the destabilizing effect of the migration that's coming in. There's a lot going on in that region. And so, we're here to answer your questions. But what I can tell you is, what I can encourage you with right now is that, to the extent that you're influencers, part of that influence has to be a manifestation of the will of the people. And what does that look like ultimately, given the stakes that are before you? You've had the benefit of traveling to a nation that is far more developed, and you live a highly developed life compared to the folks back home. Right? You have, I believe, a special obligation. That soil raised you. That soil gave you everything you needed to come to the United States and become successful and create community. You're what W.E.B. Du Bois would call the talented 10th. Google it. Right? What do you do with that talent? This is the time, if ever there was a time. However, if things devolve because, people don't see the bigger picture for the nation, it could be an unmitigated disaster. And the sharks are already circling. I haven't met them, but I know they're out there. So I think we can open up.
Let me just add one thing, because I want to get to something it's a little sensitive, but I think that we need to have this conversation too, because we did ask some hard questions, knowing the history of Guyana, and we did go into it. We talk about racial strife. We talked about that with both the administration and the opposition. And we talked about the ability to try to heal that, because when you talk about the opportunities, it should be there. But I want you to know that that did not go, because we talked to the president about the inclusion of Indo-Guyanese, and we talked to the former president about the inclusion of African Guyanese. And they both were focused on trying to say that the violence and the separation of the past, they are focused on making sure that that does not raise its ugly head ever again. And they also said that they were focused on this election, both sides, to have no violence during the election. Now, there was there is a piece that has to be resolved that's not based upon some of the ethnic differences, but based upon what was the voter count for the number of registered voters. So that issue came up because of about 90,000, because they came up to try to check where people were living, to make sure that people were living in the appropriate place. And if they were not at a place where they had been registered before, and say they moved and they didn't re-register, then they're going to have to vote at their old place and not at the new place. And they thought that, especially on the opposition side, that would cause some confusion. And so that is something that they are going to, trying to work out. We ask the Electoral Commission, as well as our embassy, as well as the Carter Center, because the key to the Carter Center's observation, as well as the EU is going to be there, the OAS is going to be there, so there's several other organizations, is not just to watch what's taking place on election day, because we all know that if you just wait to then, the election could be already stacked. So what takes place well before, and I'm told that the Carter Center and all of them have been there for a while, making observations and looking at how this whole thing is developed. And based upon their conversation with us, I came away convinced that every precaution has been taken place. They've got something to fix, and ultimately the fix is to determine the individuals that are here going back to vote, whether they're on the voting rolls or not, how that's going to work out. It will be something that has to be fixed, and that probably won't be fixed until post-election time. So that's an issue that both sides, everybody agreed was there. And I'm also was told that one of the reasons why the 90 days, I'm trying to anticipate some of your questions already. The 90 days was not adhered to was because the Election Commission couldn't get it together in time. And so now we were assured by the Election Commission, because we wanted to do that there's no further delay. We wanted to make sure that there was not going to March 2nd comes and then they say, oh, we got a problem and so we've got to delay the elections or something. That there's no further delay. They assured us that they're ready, they've got it under control, and they're ready to go. And the Carter Center assured us that they thought that they had it under control and ready to go and watched it. So I wanted to throw that out there. I want you to know that we didn't sit back and we did ask some of the hard questions and some of and deal with the historic part of what had in the past. But I was somewhat relieved in that both sides seemed to be thinking about the future and not the past, and how we can bridge that gap, and how that also, so because as Yvette said is right, oil is a blessing or a curse. And if it's just a few people at the top that's going to get a whole lot of money, and the mass majority of individuals do not see any value or any difference in their standard of living, then it's going to be a curse and you're going to have a problem. But they seem to be focused, both sides, to try to make sure that there are opportunities so that everybody can benefit. In fact, talking about creating, as happens in Norway, for example, sovereign wealth funds, which then gets to benefit everybody. Because if you look at the standard of living, and I use that somewhat as a reference, in Norway, that's what they have, and that's the system that they set up with reference to oil. And it seems as though they're trying to do that at least that's the plan, and want to work with that in Guyana also. So now I will sit down and shut up and listen to you and take questions from you, and we go from there. Questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman, District Leader. First of all, I want to thank both of you for doing this. This is a tremendous thing that has been done, not in previous elections, but this one. So we're very happy.
Can you take the mic for this?
We can share this.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, let me just, on behalf of everyone here, thank you. Thank you very much for doing this, because we feel relieved. We saw your picture next to that of the ambassador over there, meeting with the officials and everybody. This has been a tremendous effort on your part, and we're relieved to hear what you just said, that the violence and fair and free election might happen. Not the violence, but fair and free election. So my question is, Did you get a chance to meet with the leaders of the smaller parties? Because that was one of the things that came up, that these guys, if they came together, could probably hold a balance of power in the country and determine the future. And we don't know exactly, living over here, how that would play out. So if you got a chance to meet with any of the smaller parties, and if so, what is your impression?
No, I don't think we did meet with any smaller parties. I think, though, what it is, you're right. I think that whoever wins have talked about they have to negotiate with some of the other parties to get them on their side to have a government that runs smoothly. So it was somewhat, unlike here, but like, I'll give the example, like in Israel, you have the party that wins, and then in order to form a government that works, you've got to bring in some of the smaller parties so that you can make sure that you have the maximum number of individuals in the legislative body. So we didn't get a chance to meet with any of them, but the conversation about their inclusion, I think, will come and they will negotiate with whoever wins, which is what, the reference that I was getting, so that they can be a part of it.
Good evening. Thank you again. Quick question. After election, is then the most of violence what the U.S. government and what you guys plan to do if after the election you have violence?
Well, I'm hoping that there is no violence. And just remember that the United States does not, and we don't recommend, get involved in a sovereign government's scenario. So we're not going to be the one. So what we were hoping and what we told both sides, whoever wins, we would like to come back down to the inauguration, to whoever wins, and have a strong presence there to talk about how the relationship with the United States and Guyana, whoever wins, has got to stay strong, and we will stand by that because we got to have a strong relationship in that regards.
Congresswoman, thank you very much for keeping your promise and going to Guyana. I must say that 48 hours is not enough time for you to really make it as much as you did, and we thank you for that. I know you have a busy schedule. Your duty, of course, is to constituents over here. However, you have that purpose and that long stretch right up to the U.S. Congress and the highest powers of government that can ensure that elections are free in Guyana. So my question to you is that in 1992, that was the date, Congressman, that Jimmy Carter Center, they actually stayed at my house in Guyana. That's why I know about this. That was a groundbreaking time in Guyana that elections were restored, free and fair elections. And since then, there has not been fair and free elections of one way or the other. There have always been problems. My question to you is whether you can use your influence, which is undoubted in America, in terms of ensuring that the elections are certified by the Carter Center. I don't know if they're there permanently. You said you saw them there. I hope they're there permanently from now. They are very key to this because we have read a lot of allegations from both sides, and that will continue to happen and to go on. The people are going to play to those emotions, and the multinationals are going to exploit the people of Guyana in terms of bribery and outbidding. We hear of massive resources being disposed of by certain ministers, and the corruption is endemic. So the first thing we have to get is free and fair elections. How can you ensure that these elections are certified by the Carter Center? And if that is possible, if you can then use that to ensure that there's peacekeeping forces in Guyana to avoid any sort of violence that will raise its ugly head, being that the situation there is so critical or so volatile. And many people have used this race war, one against the other, as you alluded to. So the question is whether you can, get the Carter Center to remain there and for it to be some provision whereby both sides can agree to be certified. Because GCOM has been heavily criticized. We can't depend on that. We need an independent party, and perhaps Carter Center historically has been that party or that person, that third party, to certify the elections.
Let me just say this. The Carter Center has said that they will be, each one of those oversight bodies will come up with their own conclusions. So the Carter Center will say what it says, the OAS will say what it says, the EU, but they said they will be in contact with each other, asking each other, what did you see, what did you do, et cetera, so that they could try to come up with a composite so that they can make that determination. Secondly, I'll say what was I was encouraged about with the civic society, which was so important. They said they were not hearing, as they had heard in past elections, the same inflammatory dialogue and conversation in the communities from which they came from before, which caused or triggered violence. And they said that was substantially different, and as a result, a lot of young people who had not been involved and wanted to be involved in the politics and the elections before had more interest in this election and making sure that they had an opportunity to vote. So I was particularly pleased on that. What we were also told, though, and it's the same kind of scenario that's taking place here in the United States, that just like here, you get some inflammatory individuals on social media. And they're the ones that are saying this, that about the other, and trying to say, this is happening. But it is a limited number of individuals on social media that you got. I mean, I can tell you, and Yvette can tell you, that if you look at social media, how they, go after us and certain things, our government, this is all this and that. But thus far, based upon the civil society, they said that on the ground, it's not happening. It's not the same kind of rhetoric that they've seen in the past, et cetera. And they're trying to talk to folks and get folks aware of being weary of what is true as far as social media is facts are coming through. Because we have the same kind of thing in our elections. In our elections, remember, that's what it was all about with the Russians when they supposed to have been invaded. It's bots that were directed specifically to minority communities to convince folks that either Hillary was crooked or some of that nature, and we know how that happened. And so you've got some folks that are now trying to perpetuate the same thing. So we've got to be weary of that and make sure that we're making sure that the facts not allow those who want to instigate trouble let that win.
And I want to say, you're going to keep hearing me say that. I'm going to sound like a broken record. The only way that you diffuse situations is by diffusing them. And if there are folks on social media talking about violence, there need to be people on social media talking about nonviolence. Period. Full stop. If you're going to feed into it, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But we're telling you that the folks on the ground are not feeling the same type of energy that they felt before when things would become violent. Right? So, and at the end of the day, I believe that nations are going to develop the way nations develop in their own way with their own people. How influential are you? How influential are you? I mean, these are the questions we have to ask ourselves. Because if we give in to this, I mean, the potential for what Guyana could be in the Western Hemisphere should unite people across, across all other conflicts. But if you allow, people talk about corruption, but people look at it and turn the other way. Because everyone has the promise of a benefit when no one actually benefits in the end. At some point, the corruption ends and someone gets hurt or. So if we know this already as human beings, why are we distracted by that? Why aren't we pushing for another direction and another dynamic? And I think, again, how influential are you? Oftentimes, we manifest what we fear the most by, promoting it in a way. So, I think that we were able to get a change with President Barack Obama in America because people believed we could. And now we're in a far more convoluted, highly propagandized environment, and that can permeate the entire space including Guyana. And there will be those who want to basically disrupt everything because they feel there's a benefit personally, not for nation building. How do you counteract that becomes the challenge.
So, first of all, thank you very much for going to Guyana. It happened during the impeachment trial. I know you guys were swamped, but you still took the time to head out there and did everything greatly. And, and thanks for what you do in Congress, and the result of the impeachment was phenomenal for us in this district. My question is about the integrity of the voters list. It's a very consequential election, like you correctly stated. But I think I'd like if you could elaborate a little bit more of your communications with GCOM on the integrity of the voters list. Rigging tends to take place in the outlying areas where folks are not focused as much, but can be consequential to the results. And then talk a little bit about your involvement post-visit, especially in light of the recent comments made by one of the ministers asking, in the current caretaker AFC APNU government, asking their supporters to mask around the voting places after the election on the 2nd of March. Thanks.
So, I am relying on this answer on the response I got back from the Carter Center. You know, we had rough, tough questions with the Electoral Commission, and of course they said that it was the integrity was there, that it was a qualified list, etc. But we wanted to verify with someone that is not. I know, you know, we talked about the 3, 3, and 1, but we wanted to make sure that we also talked to the Carter Center because they had a clear understanding about the voters list and these 90,000 voters that were in question, etc. I came away, and that was it, that the Carter Center was on top of it, and that the integrity of the list would be good. They did say that they did expect, you know, if the opposition did not win, that could be a point that they would raise, you know, and so, but they was working hard to try to make sure that the integrity was there so that it would not cause someone to, because our point was, once the election is, we want both sides, whoever won, to legitimize the elections also. If everybody comes up and say it was clean, to say we you know, this is our president. We lost. If you lost, just as we have to do in the United States.
In a way.
So I would only tell you is my thought that it is, in fact, the integrity is there, is based upon the conversation we had with the Carter Center. And they kind of assured us that they went through the long process of what took place in a very meticulous manner. And so that's what I'm relying on.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for coming. My question is actually not about the election. It's about the ICJ ruling that's going to take place in the next however long. I believe in the news today it was announced, or yesterday, that they're going to hear the case of the border dispute between Guyana and Venezuela. And so my question is, what is the United States' role, position, or what have you related to this issue? Because ultimately, if the ICJ rules in our favor, the Guyana's favor, which we highly anticipate, this could either be ignored or some other issues coming up from Venezuela, which would only add to the current issues regarding oil, the election, and so forth. And we know what happened with Exxon in Venezuela back in the 90s. So.
Venezuela is a problem. It's a problem. And especially in the waters, Guyana does not have a military. Guyana doesn't have a navy, and all of that. We've already seen where the Venezuelans had intruded on a ship in the navigable waters. It's a problem, and what? Well, look, it's clear of what the current administration would do, because they're not on the side of Venezuela. And so they would be very clear, and they've made some indications of that. It was clear at the State of the Union, they put the opposition leader, he had him there, and continue to condemn Maduro, although I think Trump is a lot like Maduro. But I would think, and I would hope, and I would advocate to make sure that the decision of the ICJ is adhered to. That would be the law that should be followed. And I would then urge the OAS and those in South America to then stand up and say that that decision had to be adhered to, and try to get the surrounding countries that are in the area to be a part of that. Well, I don't know if anybody's going to want to do it, aggressively militarily. But if, in fact, it means helping to guide a ship, when we had ships in some other parts of the world, when they were starting to be pirated and hijacked, we had to make sure that there was some security to guide them through. So that's not militarily, that's just protection. So, and I would urge and argue that there should be protection. I mean, when we were there, the first cargo, I think it was 1 million barrels, were being brought out and going to Houston, Texas. And so that's why it's significantly important, and that's where America could have an interest if they're going to mess with one of our companies' boats, et cetera. So I would think that there could be some security put that way. And I know as a member of Congress, I would advocate that.
I'm going to go over here. I'm going back and forth.
Well, hold on.
I just wanted to, at this stage, add a point of clarification from the gentleman's comments about an external or any foreign entity certifying elections in Guyana. You alluded to, and you were correct, when you both stated that Guyana is a sovereign nation. Only and only GCOM is authorized by law to certify an elections, and they will have the final say. The Carter Center, as well intent and well-meaning as they are, have no such legal authority in our jurisdiction. Now, a second thing with the ICJ and the United States and the OAS, if at any time there's a conflict that would erupt between Venezuela and Guyana, most Guyanese, or I should advise most Guyanese at this stage, not to look anywhere, especially not to Washington, D.C., for any help. That little show that Trump put on there with Guaido, it's just a bloody show. And no Guyanese should take any solace from anyone running to our help. So, just as a cautionary note, as Guyanese, we should look around the world and disabuse ourselves of any silly notion about anybody running to our aid or looking for any foreign interference. It will not happen. Thank you.
I want to be clear if I wasn't. I'm not saying that the Carter Center, they cannot. That's right, okay.
Well, Congress people, welcome to my community. But my question to you is that if you walk on Liberty Avenue, not one bora or one pepper that you find there is from Guyana. What are you doing to help us to put back the phytosanitary program so that the FDA can accommodate products from Guyana? And recently, the whiskered fish was also restricted from coming here. So we're looking for your help to actually get the FDA to come to Guyana. And I was hoping that during your presence there, you could have actually give us some more information.
Well, I didn't. We didn't discuss it, but it's something that's important. I'm, actually just hearing you because I believe that one of the relations, that's how we could have a continuing relationship with Guyana that can grow. And what you're basically talking about is some kind of trade agreements that we have between our country and Guyana to have important, and it has to be, because one of the other things that I think is tremendously important, especially since you had the discovery of oil, is to keep your economy diversified and not have it just solely depend upon oil. And so therefore the products and the goods that you have there, you want to be able to utilize that to sell your products here as well as we sell our products there. And so I think that kind of, and I know the Chamber of Commerce would be interested in that, and that's a dialogue and conversation that we that's much in need. And I think that if we can do that, my hope is that the relationship between the United States and Guyana can be such that it becomes an example for other countries in South America of how we can do it and do it right. And that's another reason why this election is so important. You see, for me, when you look at what's taking place in all of South America, you've got Venezuela, you've got Ecuador, you've got, so there's the Honduras, you've got some issues, Guatemala, so you've got some issues there, and who sides with what. Then you got Colombia, and then you've got Brazil and Peru, and so what is going to win? I personally have the philosophy that in that regards, we share this hemisphere, and we've got to make sure that we're focused and doing the right thing and trading and trying to figure out economically how we can help our folks on this hemisphere. And I don't believe, and this is true not only of the Trump administration, I think that we could have done more on this hemisphere with all of the administrations and take seriously Guyana, the Caribbean, and our Central America and South America. This is our hemisphere. And if we do that seriously, then we allow danger to all of us. So I appreciate your remarks, and it's something that I can guarantee that we will take up because we want to make sure. Okay, I know you will.
And on Capitol Hill, we do have a Caribbean caucus. And I think, again, I just see this recurring theme when folks are divided, that leaves a lot of room for abuse. And everyone is suffering sort of from the middle income state challenge. However, Guyana has the potential to actually accelerate its growth into first world. It's not just the oil. When you look at just the natural resource of the nation, the challenge has been, quite frankly, the human resource being developed enough, the economy being developed enough to create a private sector that would basically promote that kind of growth and development. I'm sure the talent is resident there, but the wealth that continues to accelerate that is not there. It's here. It's all you sitting here. Right? You're dealing with infrastructure issues. All of that can be dealt with. And believe me, there's going to be some infrastructure built. It's not going to be in the hinterlands, though. It's not going to be in the interior if you all don't insist on it. Right? At the end of the day, ExxonMobil, they're gonna work with you guys, but their goal is to keep down the cost of doing business in Guyana. Exactly. Exactly. And the sovereign fund is going to be great and all of that, but if the talent is not there to cultivate that growth and that development from generation to generation, you'll just be, in a perpetual state of middle income status when you have the capacity, I believe, to take it to the next level.
I have a question specific on that too, because we were working on, and I just like to get your opinion on this. One of the things that we found out, and we work both closely with USAID, and USAID pulled out of Guyana in 2012, I believe it was in. And so our thought was, but I'd like to get your feel on this, was that we were going to write a letter to the head of the administrator of USAID, asking him to consider sending some folks down so that if there is any assistance that's needed on a technical basis that would help, folks, well, no matter where they are, so that they could then also be employed, if it's the oil industry or whatever it is, to make an assessment. And if there's any assistance that can be given, we want to make sure that we do that. So I'd like to know, from you whether you think trying to get USA, because sometimes, they pulled out in 2012 because of financial difficulties, cutting embassies down, et cetera. I don't know what the feel is of USAID when they were before, whether they should be reintroduced there. So I'd like to know your thoughts and get your opinions on that. Yes.
Specifically, so my organization is called the Guyana Economic Development Trust. We're a philanthropic organization, new, made up of diaspora members. And what we do is build the private sector through venture capital. So we have a seed fund, and we inject technical support and monies into startups in Guyana that have a potential to scale. So we have a portfolio of small companies, and we're very under the radar, which is why I'm sure people are looking at me like, what? Who are you? Right? But I have business cards. So I actually contacted USAID the other day about this, about the lack of technical support. And there is no office in Guyana. There's a regional office, I believe it's in Barbados. When I asked about funding, when I asked about programs that exist, there is a VC fund that USAID runs. It does not apply. It does not apply in Guyana. It does not apply.
In other words, Guyana is not eligible?
It is very focused on, I believe, least developed countries, which the only least developed country, the only least developed country in the region is Haiti.
Yes, I know.
So does that make sense, though? I mean, clearly it doesn't. Clearly it doesn't.
Antiquated, unfortunately, for our region, because
Right.
so many of the nations in the Caribbean, and Guyana included, are middle-income states.
Right.
So they don't tend to operate as much in what
Right.
they call middle-income states.
And OPIC has been.
And this is what the basis of our letter is, to get them in there, is if we don't fill that vacuum,
Right.
the Chinese will.
And and it's already there. It's already happening. So OPIC, which used to, there was a potential for OPIC, as you know, is now something else, and they also don't do stuff in Guyana. So if basically, I'm going to just say this: there are no DFIs operating properly in Guyana, except CDB, Caribbean Development Bank, which is obviously only lending to the government, and IDB, which again, lending to the government. So what you're talking about in terms of technical support is extraordinarily, is missing at an extraordinary level.
But, hold on.
Good evening. I was very glad to hear that you visited Guyana. And in 48 hours, most of your interaction is on a one-date basis. You don't get married after the first date. Having said that, Guyana is a flamboyantly skeptic society and a graciously charming society. Do you think that in the 48 hours you have been able to establish a credible United States presence in Guyana through yourselves? For the simple reason that I was glad to hear that you said in the beginning about the racial tension in Guyana. And there's a double whammy coming from being the United States, one being the current administration, and the second being the racial tension in Guyana being orchestrated by the United States in 62, 63 via the CIA. Do you think that they're really conscious that you have a genuine interest, or is it being perceived that this is a handshake now and we'll just move on?
My answer to you is no. Our 148-hour visit is not, and we've got to have more of a concerted engagement, because I can guarantee you if we don't, the Chinese will. When we look at who built the airport, for example, and others. So the urging that I am putting forward is that we have, and this lady here has been a leader. You talk about the Caribbean caucus, et cetera, and trying to push and stay focused and making sure that we have a real and committed relationship and interest. For us, whether we're in the Democratic caucus generally, whether it's the Caribbean caucus, which is bipartisan, whether it's the Congressional Black Caucus, she has been focused on trying to make sure that happens. I have been focused through the committee assignment that I have on Western Hemisphere is to make sure we have it. It is very difficult, I must admit, you are correct, with this administration particularly. I was able to do more things with the Obama administration, and there was more willingness to get certain things done and get down there. I mean, some of you may know, for example, he visited several different countries, and some still want to come down as the ex-president. But we've got a lot of work and catching up to do to make sure that they know that this is a true date, not even getting married, so that we can have a second date, we got it. That's right. So there's a lot of work to be done, no question.
I just think that when you have the level of knowledge resident in a member of Congress, the opening for being able to achieve that goal is there. And Greg being on foreign affairs really positions us in a good space. My extensive interest in seeing sort of the hemispheric approach to development and the U.S. playing a constructive role in that is just a passion of mine. I come from the region. My people come from the region. So that it's just a natural, and I know it's doable. The thing about it is it's been like herding cats. Let's just be real. The level of pettiness that we engage in inevitably keeps us from achieving our blessings, because these folks know divide and conquer like we know how to exhale and inhale. And I've tried time and time. I mean, I've gone through so many diplomatic corps, it's not funny. But if everyone's not going to have it, I understand that. I'm an eternal optimist. However, if there's a vast majority of folks who are focused in the right direction, you don't get exploited. But what they look for the weakest link, and it's done. The Obama administration gave us an opening, and we were so busy trying to figure out what the differences were between us, that we missed a blessing. He went to Jamaica. Come on. And Trinidad and Tobago. I was on both trips with him and went to Panama with him. And it was because I knew that they understood what the region meant. I brought in the Homeland Security argument. We can bring in every argument as to why the relationship between the United States and the region should be much more robust, strong, and mutually beneficial. But we get caught up. And I really want to encourage you in this time, if you, it may not be tangible to you right now, but you're in a powerful position. And it's the diaspora that often determines the foreign affair relationship between the United States and homes of origin. We have a congressman that we serve with, he's retiring. This man didn't stop until the war in Ireland was done. Peter King. Right? You have the same ability to do that, and you have members of Congress who actually care about it. But we take certain things for granted, and we need not do that. We need to get our acts together as quickly as we can, and we need to build a sustainable commitment to moving forward with the future that you want to pass on to your children, your grandchildren.
So we're going to move to our last question of the evening.
Actually, I don't have a question, but I just want to say thanks to both of you for coming here tonight. And several months ago, a delegation met with Congressman Meeks in his office, and I want to say that everything you told us you were going to do, you came through. You told us you were going to go to Guyana. You were going to go there and observe what's going on there, to see what the situation is there on the ground. And you did say, after you come back, you will come here and give us all an update. So I want to say thank you for keeping to your word. We all do appreciate it.
I came here as an undocumented dreamer 25 years ago. We had no health insurance. Getting bused to school meant going halfway across the borough. Then we came home to single parents who actually worked night and day. We lived in illegal housing where the biggest fear was a knock on the door. Like so many of my neighbors, we want schools that produce better results for communities of color. A transportation system that doesn't leave us stranded and late for work all the time. Where purchasing a home isn't a luxury. There's a lot we can do with the right leadership. I learned how government works and when it doesn't work, with over 10 years of leadership at 3 city agencies. For over a decade, I was the youngest person on my community board, night after night, listening to the problems of my neighbors. We brought our community together to mentor children in Southeast Queens. I always took a direct role in the challenges facing our community. And today, I'm taking another step to bring solutions. I'm Richard David, and I'm running to be your assembly member in District 31.
And in Brooklyn and in other places. One of the most important things I heard and one of the most important questions that got asked, I think, is how do we control messaging, especially messaging that's online? And when we talk about us being leaders, not just in our neighborhoods, we have to play a role policing that message, because I'm actually very optimistic that we'll have a very peaceful election, we'll have a credible election, but it only will happen if we play a role in that as well. I'm honored to be a district leader here. I'm honored to be Guyanese. That's exciting. Any other Guyanese people in the house? Okay. All right. We got some snacks. They're going to kick us out of the space, but I'm really glad that we're doing this. Thank you so much, Congressman, and thank you so much, Congresswoman.
And I want to close, I see a young man sitting here who has, I saw him not too long ago at another meeting that we had here, and he's been fighting and battling, and now I understand he is cancer-free. So I am looking forward. I know that you're coming to Washington, D.C., and when you get to Washington, D.C., you're going to have lunch with me. I'm going to take you. They have this thing called the Congressional lunchroom, dining room. And so we're going to get together, and you're going to have a great tour of the Capitol, and then we're going to have lunch in the Congressional dining room. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you all. Have a good night.